Over the past 25 years, I've had the privilege of interviewing and highlighting some truly interesting people. Everyone who is anyone, both the famous and the infamous, from presidents and their first ladies to kings and queens, movie stars and pop stars, captains of industry, heads of state, sports personalities, innovative entrepreneurs, and some pretty fascinating everyday people. Today, I'm proud to introduce you to Dr. Jim Kauffman, a dedicated educator who has made it his mission to help educate those with special needs, with a particular interest in special education in our country. And I say bravo, Dr. Jim, bravo. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes, sir. So why don't we start off, give us all a little bit of a primer. Start off by telling us a bit of the history of special education in our country.
Oh, it's a long history. I won't go into great detail, but the special ed really got started in large cities in the United States in the late 19th century. And then in the early 20th century, about in the 1920s, CEC, that is the Council for Exceptional Children, was founded, and that's the primary professional organization of special educators and special ed teachers. Go ahead to the mid-20th century, the 1950s, and what became obvious is that many children with disabilities were not being educated. They weren't in school at all. They were kept at home or sent to institutions. So special ed then became more important, and it took many years of parent advocacy and the work of professionals to develop what became known as Public Law 94-142. That was the 94th Congress. Public Law 94-142 is also known as the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. And it was signed into law in the United States in 1975 by Gerald Ford. Now, that law really brought the focus on individuals. And it called for a free, appropriate public education for all children with disabilities. And they were called handicapped at that time. So the primary focus of the law was FAPE, F-A-P-E, free, appropriate public education. And the law said, you know what, you have to treat these kids as individuals. So we have to have individual learning programs or individual learning plans for each child with a disability. And you have to place the child in the least restrictive environment. That is the LRE. And that has to be chosen by parents and teachers from a CAP, a continuum of alternative placements. So the law made it clear. First order of business is free, appropriate public education. Second, LRE, and that has to be chosen from a CAP. So that law was passed in 1975. In the 1990s, it was renamed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And the basic requirements of the law have not changed. However, there is more emphasis on placement of children with disabilities in general education.
I guess my talent is supposed to be able to take what seems complicated and make it user-friendly. It sounds like the law was designed to make sure that all students have access to a free education.
That's right.
That it is done in a manner in which does not isolate them from all other children, and in collaboration with the people who care the most about them, which are the teachers and the parents and the community. So that sounds, I don't know if that's a simplistic way of looking at it, but it sounds about right to me.
Well, it sounds right to most people. And most people understand that everything has its limits. Inclusion or general education placement, that being with other kids in a general classroom, has its limits.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important for all the kids who can do that to be there. But it's also important for kids who can't make it there, who can't be appropriately instructed there, to have a special class or a special school or school in the hospital, wherever they are. So the emphasis needs to change from where the kid is to what the kid gets.
So I'm going to ask you to put on your professor hat for me and think about how the United States treats our children's educational needs versus what other countries do. And do you think that the United States is doing a good job, or do we really have a long way to go with regard to special education?
Yeah, I think we do have a long way to go in terms of making sure that every child with a disability gets the best possible instruction. I think this is a worldwide problem. I have friends in Europe, in Germany, in Portugal, in Italy, in England, for example, and the Netherlands, in many places, Australia, New Zealand. This is a worldwide problem, and it's been made worse by the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Individuals with Disabilities, or persons with disabilities, the CRPD, Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. That convention has an Article 24 on education. It says that children should be fully included, but it doesn't define full inclusion. It doesn't mention quality of education. It doesn't mention educational progress. It just said they should be fully included. Well, here's my latest book. I don't know if you can see this or not.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you, have you published anything on this particular topic?
Oh, I've published over 100 articles in professional journals and over 30 book titles over the years. And this is 2020.
So let's talk about your latest publication and why it's so important to you right now.
Oh, okay. Well, in this book, we talk about educational inclusion as opposed to inclusion in other things. I mean, educational inclusion doesn't mean the same thing as community inclusion or housing inclusion or inclusion in other activities. Education is for the purpose of teaching a child things that are important for that kid. I really enjoyed editing this book, which brings together lots of items about the inclusion issue that I think are important.
You know, I have to tell you, just your whole way of explaining it is extremely fascinating to me, and I've been just doing a little reading of your research, and I imagine that organizations that you belong to have recognized that research. Can you walk us through some of the honors that you've received, Dr. Jim?
Yeah, there have been a few. 2011, I received the Outstanding Alumni Award from the University of Kansas School of Education. 2007, 3 of my former doctoral students, one from the University of Florida, one from the University of Louisville, one from the University of California, Santa Barbara, edited a book in my honor. It's called a Festschrift, is the German word for it. 2006, I received a special award for presentation to the media from the Society for Applied Behavior Analysis. 1994, I received the Research Award from CEC, the Council for Exceptional Children. I've had outstanding leadership awards from the Council for Children with Behavioral Disorders and the Midwest Symposium for Leadership and Behavioral Disorders, and publication awards from CEC and TED, which is the Teacher Education Division. So I've had a variety of lectureships and visiting professorships abroad. So it's been very pleasant for me.
I have no doubt that working in the special education field is particularly rewarding for you. Can you share with us some of the other things that bring you joy that also speak to your purpose?
Yes. Well, here's a little book I published in 2020 that's not academic. It just recounts my experience in getting emails from all over the world about an open letter to Dr. Laura. She was very critical of homosexuals, and it really is of interest to the LGBTQ community.
No, actually, it should be of interest to anyone, sir, who is committed to diversity and inclusion. And we often forget that in addition to racial inclusion or gender inclusion, diversity also speaks to people who were maybe veterans or differently abled or members of the LGBT community. That is the full fabric of American society.
Yes, that is a very important point.
When I hear such passion in your voice about what matters to you, I always am curious why. Why this? Why is this your passion?
I don't know. Maybe it is partly due to the fact that my father was a minister. And I think some things are really important. And my mentor was a very kind, wonderful man. He had a real passion for this, and I think some of that rubbed off. I watched my late wife as a teacher and my current wife as a teacher, both of them special education teachers, and I saw what they could do. And I saw how kids responded. And I wanted every kid to have the same opportunities as kids in their classrooms. So do we have a long way to go? Oh, you bet. We need to do a much better job of teaching special ed teachers what to do, how to teach. That's a big job.
But I'm so glad that we have someone like you out here advocating, not just for the children themselves, but for our community, because making sure that all kids have what they need to succeed is the greatest gift that we can give our community.
Well put. Well put.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Jim. I've loved spending time with you and having this conversation. And anytime I can learn about someone else's passion makes me a very happy person.
Well, thank you, Star.